Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold observation window of research station Kepler 442b, watching the alien landscape stretch endlessly before her. The planet's twin suns cast strange purple shadows across crystalline formations that jutted from the ground like frozen lightning. She had been alone on this remote scientific outpost for 6 months, conducting atmospheric studies while the rest of her team worked on the orbital platform above. The communication blackout had started 3 days ago. No responses to her daily reports, no casual chatter from the crew above, nothing but the endless hum of life support systems keeping her alive in this hostile world. Sarah told herself it was just equipment failure, solar interference, anything but the growing dread that settled in her stomach like lead. She moved through her daily routine with mechanical precision, checking instruments, recording atmospheric readings, maintaining the station's delicate systems. The work helped quiet the whispers of panic that threatened to overwhelm her rational mind. Outside, strange weather patterns danced across the sky, electromagnetic storms that could explain the communication problems. On the second day of silence, Sarah discovered the first anomaly. Her seismic sensors detected movement patterns beneath the planet's surface, rhythmic vibrations that seemed almost purposeful. She ran the data through every analysis program she had, but the patterns defied explanation. They weren't geological, weren't caused by the planet's unstable core. Something else was moving down there, something large. The third day brought more disturbing revelations. Her automated probe, deployed to collect soil samples from the nearby crystal fields, transmitted images that made her blood run cold. The crystalline formations weren't natural rock structures. They were buildings, or at least what remained of them. Ancient spires twisted into impossible geometries, their surfaces covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Sarah's hands trembled as she enhanced the images, zooming in on the alien architecture. The symbols seemed to shift and writhe when she wasn't looking directly at them, patterns that suggested intelligence far beyond anything humanity had encountered. She was looking at the remains of a civilization, one that had existed on this planet long before human surveys declared it uninhabited. As darkness fell across the alien landscape, Sarah noticed lights beginning to flicker within the crystal structures. Soft, pulsing glows that seemed to respond to her presence at the observation window. She stepped back, heart pounding, as the lights grew brighter and more numerous. Something was awakening in those ancient ruins, stirring after countless eons of slumber. The station's proximity alarm suddenly screamed to life, detecting massive movement signatures approaching from multiple directions. Sarah rushed to her instrument panel, watching in horror as dozens of large objects moved through the crystal fields toward her position. They weren't vehicles or machines, but living creatures, each one the size of a small building. Through her enhanced telescopic cameras, Sarah caught her first glimpse of the planet's true inhabitants. Beings that defied easy description, their forms shifting between solid matter and something that resembled liquid starlight. They moved with purpose, converging on the research station with deliberate intent. Their massive forms glided over the crystal formations without disturbing a single surface. Sarah's scientific training warred with primal fear as she recorded everything, knowing that this data might be humanity's only warning about what lurked on Kepler 442b. The beings surrounded her station, their presence causing the very air to shimmer with energy. She could feel their attention focused on her, ancient minds probing the edges of her consciousness with gentle curiosity. The first direct contact came as a vibration through the station's hull, a rhythmic pattern that matched the seismic readings she'd detected earlier. They were trying to communicate, using the planet itself as a medium for their language. Sarah's equipment registered electromagnetic fluctuations that seemed to carry meaning, complex data streams that her computers couldn't decode but her intuition somehow understood. These beings weren't hostile, she realized with growing wonder. They were guardians, protectors of something precious hidden within the planet's core. Her research station had been built directly above their sacred site, and her presence had awakened them from their long vigil. They were ancient beyond human comprehension, survivors of a cosmic catastrophe that had scattered their people across the galaxy eons ago. As the alien beings maintained their silent watch around her station, Sarah began to understand that she had stumbled upon something far more significant than a routine scientific mission. She was the first human to make contact with a species that had been waiting in the depths of space for countless millennia, hoping for the day when another intelligent race would find them. The communication equipment suddenly crackled to life, but the signals weren't coming from the orbital platform above. They were coming from deep space, from ships that didn't appear on any human star charts. The Guardians had sent a message across the void, calling their scattered kin to witness this moment of first contact. Sarah was no longer alone on this alien world, and, soon, she wouldn't be the only human to know of their existence. Through her windows, she watched as the crystal formations began to glow with increasing intensity, awakening systems that had lain dormant since before Earth's sun was born. The planet itself was transforming, revealing its true nature as a massive beacon designed to guide lost travelers through the cosmic dark. Sarah had inadvertently activated humanity's introduction to a galactic community that had been waiting for them to reach the stars. Her isolation was about to end in the most spectacular way imaginable, but the real test would come when the rest of humanity learned what she had discovered on this distant world. The first ship materialized in Kepler 442b's orbit 12 hours after the Guardians sent their signal. Sarah watched through her station's sensors as space itself seemed to fold and unfold, revealing a vessel unlike anything in human design. It resembled a living organism more than a machine, its hull rippling with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in harmony with the crystal formations below. Sarah's hands flew over her communication array, trying every frequency and protocol she knew to establish contact with the newcomers. The response came not through her equipment, but directly into her mind. Images and concepts flowed through her consciousness like a gentle stream, carrying messages of greeting and curiosity from beings who called themselves the Eternal Seekers. They had been wandering the galaxy for over 3 million years, searching for others who might carry the spark of true intelligence. The Guardians on the planet below were their cousins, part of an ancient alliance that had once spanned thousands of star systems before a cosmic disaster forced them to scatter and hide. Now, for the first time in eons, they had found a new species reaching toward the stars with purpose and determination. Through the mental link, Sarah learned that humanity had been watched from afar for centuries. The Eternal Seekers had observed human development with growing excitement, noting the species' remarkable adaptability and relentless drive to explore beyond their home world. Unlike so many other races they had encountered, humans seemed to possess the rare combination of intelligence, courage, and compassion that the ancient alliance valued above all else. More ships began to arrive, each one unique in design but sharing the same organic aesthetic. Representatives from dozens of survivor civilizations came to witness this historic moment, their vessels forming a vast fleet in the planet's orbit. Sarah found herself at the center of the most significant event in human history, a lone scientist serving as ambassador to species that had witnessed the birth and death of entire galactic civilizations. The mental communications grew stronger and more complex as additional minds joined the link. Sarah experienced fragments of alien memories, glimpses of worlds beyond imagination and technologies that seemed like magic. She saw the great library worlds where knowledge from a million species was preserved, mobile planets that served as arks for endangered civilizations, and vast networks of consciousness that spanned multiple dimensions. But, with the wonder came sobering revelations about the dangers that lurked in the cosmic deep. The Eternal Seekers shared their knowledge of the Devourers, ancient machines left behind by a long-dead empire that consumed entire star systems for raw materials. They spoke of the Silence Makers, entities that existed in the spaces between realities and sought to return the universe to primordial emptiness. These threats had driven the ancient alliance into hiding, forcing them to become nomads and guardians rather than the great builders they had once been. Sarah realized that humanity stood at a crossroads. The knowledge and technology offered by the Eternal Seekers could advance human civilization by thousands of years, but it would also make them visible to cosmic threats they were not yet equipped to handle. The choice would not be hers alone to make, but her voice would carry significant weight in the discussions to come. Down on the planet's surface, the Guardians began to emerge from their crystal sanctuaries for the first time in millennia. Sarah watched in awe as beings of living light rose from the ancient structures, their forms stretching toward the sky like pillars of aurora. They were preparing to activate dormant systems buried deep within the planet's core, technology that would transform Kepler 442b into a meeting place for the scattered remnants of the ancient alliance. The communication blackout that had isolated Sarah's station was revealed to be a protective measure, shielding human space from the massive energy signatures that would soon emanate from the planet. The orbital platform and its crew were safe but quarantined until the Eternal Seekers could determine how to proceed with first contact protocols. As the planet's transformation accelerated, Sarah found herself changing as well. The constant exposure to alien mental energies was expanding her consciousness, allowing her to perceive dimensions of reality that human senses had never been designed to detect. She could feel the vast network of consciousness that connected all members of the Ancient Alliance, a web of shared knowledge and experience that spanned the galaxy. Through this expanding awareness, Sarah began to understand humanity's true potential. Humans possessed a unique quality that even the Ancient Alliance had never encountered: the ability to form deep emotional bonds with other species while maintaining their individual identity. Most races that achieved galactic consciousness either became hive minds or retreated into isolated individualism. Humans seemed capable of finding a balance between unity and diversity that could revolutionize how the Ancient Alliance functioned. The first delegation of alien ambassadors descended to the planet's surface in vehicles that resembled floating flowers made of crystallized music. Sarah prepared to leave her research station for the first time in months, donning an environmental suit enhanced with technology the Eternal Seekers had shared through the mental link. The suit would allow her to survive in the transformed atmosphere while providing translation capabilities that worked on the level of pure meaning rather than words. As she stepped onto the alien soil, Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down upon her. She was about to become the first human to walk among beings that had witnessed the rise and fall of entire galactic epochs. Every step she took carried the hopes and dreams of her entire species, along with the terrible responsibility of representing humanity to powers beyond imagination. The crystal spires around her had transformed into something resembling a vast amphitheater, with platforms and walkways that adjusted themselves to accommodate beings of wildly different physiologies. Sarah saw creatures that existed as pure energy patterns, others that seemed to be living geometric shapes, and beings that appeared to be mobile ecosystems complete with their own weather systems. At the center of the gathering stood the eldest of the Guardians, a being so ancient that looking at it was like staring into the heart of a star. It had been waiting on this world since before Earth's continents took their current form, maintaining the beacon that had finally guided humanity to this moment of first contact. Through the mental link, it welcomed Sarah not just as a representative of her species, but as the fulfillment of a prophecy that had sustained the Ancient Alliance through their darkest hours. The real challenge would come when Sarah had to return to human space and convince her own people that they were ready to join a community of civilizations that predated their entire history. The universe was far stranger and more dangerous than humanity had ever imagined, but it was also filled with wonders and allies beyond their wildest dreams. Sarah stood before the assembled representatives of the Ancient Alliance, her enhanced environmental suit translating her words into concepts that could be understood by minds that had never known human language. The amphitheater of living crystal hummed with anticipation as beings older than Earth's oceans waited to hear what humanity could offer to their eternal struggle against the cosmic dark. The eldest guardian had shared the true scope of the challenge facing the galaxy. The Devourers were stirring again after eons of dormancy, their automated fleets beginning to probe the outer reaches of known space. The Silence Makers had grown stronger during the long isolation, feeding on the despair of civilizations that had fallen while the Ancient Alliance remained hidden. Soon, the scattered survivors would have to choose between emerging to fight or retreating so far that they would become myths whispered among the stars. Through the mental link that now connected her to hundreds of ancient minds, Sarah felt the weight of civilizations that had chosen the path of withdrawal. Species that had possessed technology beyond human comprehension had voluntarily diminished themselves rather than risk exposure to cosmic threats. They had become gardeners of empty worlds, shepherds of extinct ecosystems, and keepers of knowledge that no one would ever use again. But humanity represented something different, something that had captured the imagination of every member of the Ancient Alliance. Humans had a quality that these ancient beings had forgotten in their millions of years of existence: the willingness to take impossible risks for the sake of others. While older civilizations calculated probabilities and minimized exposure to danger, humans consistently chose to help strangers even when the odds were overwhelmingly against them. Sarah shared her species' history through the mental link, showing the assembled beings moments when humans had sacrificed everything to save others. She projected images of soldiers who had thrown themselves on grenades to protect their comrades, scientists who had exposed themselves to deadly radiation to prevent greater disasters, and ordinary people who had risked their lives to rescue strangers from burning buildings or sinking ships. The reaction from the Ancient Alliance was profound. Many of these civilizations had developed beyond the concept of individual sacrifice, their consciousness so expanded that personal death had become meaningless. They had achieved a form of immortality through technology and shared consciousness, but, in doing so, they had lost the driving force that had once made them great explorers and builders. Through the mental link, the Eternal Seekers shared their own tragic history. They had once been the greatest architects in the galaxy, building structures that spanned entire solar systems and creating art that could be seen from distant galaxies. But, when the cosmic threats emerged, they had chosen preservation over creation, safety over growth. Their magnificent cities had been abandoned, their great works left to decay, as they focused entirely on survival. Sarah realized that humanity's apparent recklessness was actually their greatest strength. Where ancient civilizations saw foolish risk-taking, she saw the engine of progress that had driven her species from primitive tool users to star travelers in a geological instant. Humans didn't just adapt to their environment, they changed it to suit their needs, often in ways that seemed impossible until they succeeded. The eldest guardian posed the crucial question that would determine humanity's fate: would they be willing to lead a renewed alliance against the cosmic threats, knowing that success would require sacrifices that might destroy everything they hoped to protect? The ancient civilizations could provide knowledge and resources beyond imagination, but they needed someone with the courage to use that power when the time came. Sarah's answer came not from careful calculation, but from the same instinct that had driven humans to cross oceans on wooden ships and launch themselves toward the stars on pillars of fire. She accepted the responsibility, speaking not just for herself but for a species that had always chosen the difficult path toward something better. Humanity would take the risks that their ancient allies could no longer bear, not because they were ignorant of the dangers, but because they understood that some things were worth fighting for even against impossible odds. The response from the assembled civilizations was immediate and overwhelming. Ancient archives that had been sealed for millions of years began to open, revealing technologies that could reshape reality itself. The Guardians shared the location of hidden worlds where weapons capable of destroying entire star systems lay waiting for someone brave enough to wield them. The Eternal Seekers offered to teach humans the secrets of consciousness transfer and dimensional engineering. But the most precious gift came from a collective decision that had never been made in the history of the Ancient Alliance. For the first time since they had been scattered across the galaxy, the survivor civilizations chose to emerge from hiding and reclaim their abandoned territories. They would rebuild their great cities and restart their magnificent projects, using human courage as the catalyst for their own renewal. Sarah found herself appointed as the first human ambassador to the Ancient Alliance, tasked with coordinating between her species and beings that existed on scales of time and space that human minds could barely comprehend. The research station where she had waited in isolation would become the first embassy, a meeting place where human diplomats could learn to communicate with entities that might be individual consciousness or entire civilizations depending on how one looked at them. The communication blackout ended as suddenly as it had begun, but the signals that reached Sarah's equipment brought news that changed everything. The human orbital platform had not been idle during the contact period. Using enhanced sensors provided by the Eternal Seekers, they had detected Devourer scout fleets approaching the outer edges of human space. The cosmic threat that the Ancient Alliance had hidden from for eons was already hunting for Earth and its colonies. Sarah realized that humanity's introduction to the galactic community would be through baptism by fire. They would have to prove themselves worthy of the Ancient Alliance's trust by facing an enemy that had consumed entire galactic arms. But they would not face it alone, and they would not face it as the primitive species that had first detected radio signals from space less than 2 centuries ago. The crystal formations around the amphitheater began to resonate with new frequencies as ancient manufacturing systems awakened throughout the planet. Weapons that had never been tested would be built for human hands, ships that existed partially outside normal space would be constructed to human specifications, and technologies that could turn thoughts into reality would be adapted for human minds. As the first Devourer fleets crossed into the outer solar system 6 months later, they encountered something that their programming had never been designed to handle. Instead of a single isolated species defending their home system, they found an Ancient Alliance reborn, led by beings who considered 1,000-to-1 odds merely an interesting challenge rather than certain defeat. The silence that had once protected the ancient civilizations was broken by the battle songs of a species that had learned to turn their greatest weakness into their ultimate strength. Humanity had waited in silence long enough. Now it was time to make some noise that would echo across the galaxy for eons to come, announcing to both friends and enemies that Earth's children had finally come home to claim their place among the stars. Sarah watched from her transformed research station as human and alien fleets moved together in formations that defied conventional military doctrine. They were no longer waiting for the future to find them. They were actively creating it, one impossible victory at a time, proving that sometimes the best defense against an uncaring universe is to care so much about it that surrender becomes literally unthinkable.